Hello, folks. Today is Tuesday, May 22nd. This is the normal SIG cluster lifecycle call. We have a kind of sparse agenda, so folks could fill in the details, and if they have agenda items, please add them to the meeting notes. The first topic we have was the conversation we had from last time was whether the Mirantis folks had offered, and we had talked during KubeCon about sponsoring the Docker and Docker solution to be imported into the Kubernetes SIGs repository. And I wanted to have the last chat to see if there's any speak now or forever hold your peace around this topic. So is there any dissent or any other questions, comments, complaint, concerns around it?
So I would really like it to sync with SIG testing before, if that is feasible. So I got pinged by James Munnelly, and they have he is working at Jestech, and they have this fork of Kubernetes test infra that does pretty much the same, but it's even more layers. So the thought there is that it integrates really well with Prow, which is the SIG testing main project for automation. So if we could, or that works automatically. So it could make sense for us to at least take a look and compare the differences between the two projects and see if they can merge, or if it's actually. So I tried it locally and it seemed to work pretty well. I don't know, have others tried?
Well, actually, the folks from SIG testing did chime in the discussion topic in Google Groups, and the idea is that the projects have a bit different scope. This test infra DND solution is intended for building Kubernetes from source, while KDC has wider scope. For example, it's to be used by projects that extend Kubernetes for testing on public CI. It works against remote Docker engines, and so on. So as far as I understand, at least from this message from SIG testing folks, they agree that the projects should coexist. Maybe there is a chance it will be possible to merge them somehow, and I'm still hoping to rewrite KDC in Go too. So maybe the projects may merge, but so far there's probably room for both of them.
Okay, how about so what are the technical differences between them, you mean, besides it being written in Bash, KDC? Or are they not that many?
Sorry, what again?
Are there many technical differences between the two projects, or are there not that many, besides KDC being written in Bash?
Well, there are. For instance, Cisco folks added IPv6 support to KDC to test IPv6 in Kubernetes. Also, I frankly didn't check if it was added, but last time I saw this test infra, it didn't support multiple different CNI implementations, and also. Well, they need to build Kubernetes from source. Also, is there in their case.
Okay, that's fine by me, I guess. Then my main concern after that is who's going to maintain this stuff, because I really want to have dedicated people. Otherwise, it's going to slip. I mean, we talked about rewriting KDC in Go more than a year ago, at KubeCon Berlin, and I haven't seen that happen. So, and also from what I saw, there were latency on the KubeADM. So, for example, latency on merging things to the my rented repo. How are we gonna address that if we merge in the Kubernetes one?
Well, hopefully I will be able to work more on the project now, at least from the internal situation in Mirantis. But I hope that more with the project gaining more visibility, maybe someone else will be willing to step in and help maintaining the project. It will be appreciated very much.
Tim, Robert, do you have any?
So there's no formalization from the higher level project perspective of whether or not you can have multiple projects within a SIG sponsored location. I do agree that like I would really like to Highlander these solutions, and by that I would like to say there can be only one, because there are many of them and they don't all meet all the requirements that we would like. But at the same time, I don't want to start a new project. I want people to amalgamate on a single one, right? If people have bandwidth, there's nothing preventing us from moving, and if people have bandwidth, it succeeds. If not, it dies, and we do some type of attic process, right? And we could also let multiple things evolve in their own time frame. But I'm concerned in that there are now like, I don't even know how many, I lost track of the count of the sheer number of them. There are so many people doing the same thing, right? I would ideally like to have one sanctioned, solution that that works for most of the use cases. And I don't even really care about the implementation details. I really don't. So long as I can spin up kubeadm clusters easily. It can be written in like Ruby and I wouldn't care. So long as it worked and was maintained, right? That's the key. I'll stop there and see what thoughts are.
Yeah, I guess I would second the part about maintenance that both Lucas and Tim brought up, because I think we have seen, even with kubeadmin, when Lucas disappears to go back to school for long stretches of time, just the bandwidth from the rest of the SIG sort of has some trouble sort of filling the gaps there. And so I think that having a new project, even if there's one really strong maintainer, is not enough, right? We need to have multiple people that are signed up to do maintenance for it, probably from the get-go.
Do you have an owner's list you could send out on that email of who would all be maintaining this?
Yeah, I have it. I already added all the necessary boilerplate files, including owner's code of conduct on a separate branch. One moment, I will post it to the topic, but I also paste a link here in a second.
I personally won't have time to maintain it. I mean, I'm going to go to the military soon enough, so that's a struggle. How about Heptio? Is it like something you would be willing to?
From a maintainable perspective, like part of the adoption into the SIGs repository is not for like individual SIG sponsors to maintain. It's meant to provide a common safe playground for multiple vendors to work on, right? So long as the owner's file has legitimate owners that are the maintainers of it, right? And the SIG sponsors can help at best to get things rolling, but we're not going to be able to take on maintenance of it.
Google.
I think we don't have bandwidth. I don't think to add add owners probably to a new project right now. We've got our hands full on it.
Anyone else listening wanting to become a maintainer for a possible for this project if we move it?
I may also ask some folks that use it for IPv6 work if there will be anyone willing to help, because they use KDC a lot and they may be interested in helping maintaining it.
I think that's the biggest question, right? So the biggest question that's outstanding is maybe follow up with how do we want to handle this? Follow up with a listing of owners and maintainers, or maybe if you can post that link in here.
Just posted the link to current owners file I created on this separate branch that I'm going to merge if we move the project.
Who's the DIND cluster maintainers?
There we
One
go.
second.
Known as Alice's.
Yeah, the second one. Sorry, here it is. There's a couple of other folks from Mirantis who may help with it, but I am going to be the primary maintainer from the Mirantis side.
I don't really have a problem. We can always do it like a trial period too. We can reevaluate, and I can talk within the steering committee from that perspective and see if we can land a happy home with it. And also, this could be a rallying point for people to converse about it. So if JetStack wants to contribute their thing, I'd be happy with them coming to talk, and because it sounds like everybody wants a single solution. We could use this as a rallying cry, and we could talk with other folks, because Google has pieces of this in their testing infra. Other people have pieces of this. I know some Red Hatters that have done their own thing. I do know that JetStack folks have done their own thing, and this one too. So
I think a trial period is fair, because right now it's, I said, like, the maintainership of it is still unclear. Like if there's enough people, but yeah, I'm happy to, as you said, use it as a starting point, and maybe if we do this and it's like, how should I put it, like controversial enough to favor one of them, we might use it as a way to start the discussion to actually try to converge the things.
That seems reasonable to me, because like I have no stake in the solution game. I only just want a tool.
Yeah, me too.
All right, so I think is this a soft go with the notion that we'll come back and revisit it?
I think so. What trial period should we say? 3 months, 6 months?
I think we should revisit commits in 3 months and maintain.
Tim, you may have a clear perspective on this. Is there any issue importing code from the Mirantis org into the Kubernetes org, or later kicking it back out? I know I was having some conversations yesterday where we were talking about trying to sort of repatriate some of the cloud provider code into the Google Cloud Platform organization, and that the lawyers were telling us that that was tricky.
So long as the Apache 2 license has been adhered to, we should be fine. I will talk with the CNCF folks one last time before I pull the trigger, but we haven't, in my past life, there was never a Red Hat, as long as your licensing model was consistent, it didn't matter, because the licensing model would be okay. But I do know that like Google's layers are very specific versus like Red Hat lawyers, which are very different. So
I guess I'm less concerned, I think, about moving it into the Kubernetes org than if we said after the trial period we want to move it back out. Where is it going to go at that point, right?
I think we could just mark the repo as deprecated, right? Like, you know, and then have some lifecycle period or something like that.
Well, I'm okay with that.
In the worst case scenario, it's possible to create a new org and move it to that new organization.
There actually, I'll talk with the steering committee too, because like we talked about an attic, right? There needs to be a long-term attic for some of this stuff, which is like what other projects do. So they typically, if projects are not maintained, they push it off to the attic, and sometimes it can graduate back in. You can dust it off the attic shelf and bring it back downstairs, and now your lamp is cool again. But I'll talk with them too to try and get clarification on life cycle. But I'm okay with the trial period too. Do we want to wait on that before we do it, or do we want to just do it and then come back with feedback?
Let's say if we can get the clarification from the steering committee at least sometime during this week, and as soon as we have that, just post like a mailing list. I'm doing this tonight or something.
Okay. Is that
and
okay?
Then that means basically we've approved it in the SIG, and you're just checking it up that everything's okay with the steering committee before doing it. But I think if we don't have any like strong opinions against here, we could just say feel free to go after you've double checked things.
Okay.
3 months as the period. Is that okay by everyone else?
Sounds good, I think.
Okay. I will send off the email to the steering committee tonight or today, maybe right after this meeting, and then we'll go from there. Should we go into the next topic?
Yeah.
All right. So I added this agenda item, which is like, what more things do we need for the release? Because we've done a lot of shuffling, and I want to get a finite list of closed out feature additions or modifications. I know the freeze now has shifted to June 5th. Is that correct to everyone?
Yes, we messed it up last week. We were talking about the dates, but yeah, June 5th is the current code freeze date. They might do the 29th in case it proves to be extremely flaky right now. But so SIG release had a meeting last week where they said things seems to be stable. Everyone's okay with deferring the code freeze 1 week. Actually, like 2 hours after that meeting, all the GCE or like all the EDE suits on GCE started flaking really heavily. Like they'll be flaking all week since. So this decision might still be, I don't know, reverted in case it seems to like just continue. The June 5th date was set after the conclusion. Everything seems fine.
I wouldn't mind us doing an informal freeze by the 29th. You know, informal and like, let's try to get all the remaining items, feature additions in for like, namely the config changes. Those are the big ones, right?
Yeah.
And the dynamic configuration stuff. Anything beyond that should be like, let's stop, because this release has a ton of changes in it. Now it had a lot of changes before. Now it's got a lot of changes in it. So I'd like to stabilize and start to ramp folks into documentation and testing, because we clearly have a need to fix a bunch of documentation issues. As I mentioned in the last meeting, a a big problem we have is stemming the tide of people submitting issues into kubeadm, and it's more or less a documentation and UX problem. And I do think we need to address those issues by potentially bisecting some of the docs and writing them judiciously, so that way we add extra steps to the docs, if only for the purposes of being able to diagnose problems as they come inbound, as well as, you know, addressing any UX, front-loading the UX questions into some of the docs, because I know there's a ton of issues with regards to people understanding how you do configuration overrides and having examples set in place. Because currently, we, in the past couple of cycles, not just 1.10, but 1.9 and before, we added a whole bunch of knobs, right? And now in stabilizing the config, we're pushing out a lot of those extra knobs. And we're saying use the other, either metadata or this other apparatus. So this is going to confuse a ton of people. So we've added new command line arguments, or new command lines, as well as changed the default configuration. So I fully expect there to be folks who are confused by the changes.
Yeah, so I wrote up here local. I haven't had time to submit this as an issue, but like high level docs we should add go along the lines of packaging kubeadm and running on non-systemd systems, running EDU tests against kubeadm clusters, customizing control plane arguments with kubeadm, securing your kubeadm cluster even more, customizing the kubelets and integrating with other CRI runtimes, customizing the proxy and DNS add-ons, testing pre-release versions of Kubernetes with kubeadm, upgrading your version 1 alpha 1 config to version 1 alpha 2. I'm going to submit all that as an issue, but I would like those to be at least dedicated pages, because as we said, we've had small fragments of all of these pieces inside of the same file. So you would just go to kubeadm reference and find those things. But they weren't discoverable if you were on the kubeadm getting started guide. You wouldn't see them if you didn't go to the reference and scroll down like 50 pages, and then you came to like, this is how the drop-in works. So I propose to break out most of the reference guide into, for example, these 9 topics. I'm going to write, or I can take on writing the upgrading version 1 alpha 1 API to version 1 alpha 2, as I've been doing that, as well as the kubelets and package stuff, because I've been tinkering around with that as well. Any other like running ETA tests with Sonoboy, or like securing or customizing control plane args, similar things. Yeah. I'd be happy to see other folks, right? Cool.
Let's log all the issues, and we'll get everybody rallied, at least from our side, to get the docs in place. It's a P0 to get that in place, because without it, we're going to be in trouble. So we already have a bunch of docs issues currently, and we're going to address some of those too. But what I'll try to do is rationalize the priority across some of the docs, and give a level set on the priority settings. So I'm going to have to do that soon.
I'm going to take care of the new commands for sure. I have some questions about the rest of the stuff. I was hoping that Jason is going to join today, so that maybe he can take care of the core DNS transition at least.
We can definitely add documentation for it. I was hoping core DNS would be like, you didn't see anything. That was one of those changes.
Should be.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
There are like 20 pages on core DNS not being the default option. Yeah. So what else do I have on my list? Lucas, are you going to take care of the kubelet config via version file?
Yes. As I've researched a lot into that together with Mike Thorfinn that is working on a similar thing. I'm gonna write that. I already wrote up the like long issue. I'm gonna convert into a cap, but I'm gonna convert that into a cap, but I might do that after our informal or formal code freeze, as I have like 1 or 2 PRs for that still to submit.
And we also have a bunch of API changes. Are you going to take care of those too?
Yes.
Okay. Something else about the docs. I don't think we can automate everything for 1.11, like generating the config and showing it to the user on the website. I guess we can point towards kube ADM config print default, which is going to help them. And also we can show the Go docs for the master configuration as well. Instead of showing examples of outdated like Alpha 1 configs, we can say, hey, we have these new commands and here's also our API. So take a look at that.
I'd prefer Godoc and referencing Godoc versus trying to like maintain, because this is a common pattern that I've seen fail everywhere, is that people write all these docs for configuration files and then it changes. And then they have to rewrite their entire thing, or it gets stale and it's confusing to the user.
And also config print default can show them the YAML as well.
So
yes,
I think
that's why I added it, but it doesn't say what the nub does, which is, I think, what Tim is trying to say.
Yeah. So I think the documentation that says like, here's the UX experience around the config, and then point to the actual Godoc reference for the details of the actual field.
I see. Well, you can possibly extend this to print to some of the subfields of the master configuration. Like here is the kube proxy config, for instance, if you want to use kube proxy. Here is here are the fields for the kube proxy.
So the kubeadm configuration embeds the kube proxy configuration. So that is actually all the time you print master configuration, it's going to be there. But I don't see us adding documentation in the print defaults command, at least not yet. Instead, we have to generate from Godoc, as Tim said, the documentation for our API types and put them on our website. This would preferably work automatically, but I think in the meantime, we should have the tools to generate these manually, and or manually in the sense that we have a command you have to run which generates all the docs, and then we just have to post manual a PR. In the future, this should just work, so that we should have some in the docs team's release process, this is gonna be generated automatically from the source.
Yeah, so the tool which basically pulls stuff from the master repository to the website repository is currently broken because of the Hugo transition. The website now uses Hugo as a backend, and it broke not only the folder structure but also the tool chain that handles the automation. So that's what I'm suggesting, to not plan this for 1.11, because they first have to fix the website repository.
We can still generate things manually and check it in.
Yes, that's what
Godoc.
that's what I'm gonna do. I'm talking about the automation. That it's not
okay.
feasible.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay. So, do you want me to talk about the other things that have to be in, or do we have other things on the agenda?
Just closing it out. No more new features, please. There's a lot. There's a huge gap in understanding of docs level of changes that we are going to need and the UX experience around it. So I think it's
understanding of the, sorry, I didn't hear.
Just the change. So the change is fairly significant. So just let's set aside the time to stop making stuff, do bug fix PRs, do the docs changes now that we need to do, as well as like start surfacing some of the other UX experience issues that I know are going to come up as part of us actually testing. Because we haven't really, we still don't have an automated test for the end-to-end test suite. So if we start to create that test plan, to have that in place in the devel docs, that would be super helpful. And then, you know, add tests too. So adding more tests, adding more docs.
So generating documentation for adding the test infra have been challenging because they've varied all the times I've done it so far, been different. Just like happens to be, yeah. So every time I've done it so far, I've just synced with the SIG testing folks like Ben and Jeff and Sen, like what needs to be done this time. But yeah, if and when things stabilize, I hope we can add more information on how to add the automated tests. So
the end-to-end test suite that Liz has created, we can absolutely exercise that on our own as part of a test plan, and we can absolutely add more tests to it to add more coverage for a lot of these features that we've created, and then eventually get the automation in place. So I'm totally okay with that path.
Yeah. I was talking about the other path. We should have both indeed, but I was talking about what's checked into test infra at the moment and doing the three things like generating a 111 cluster from scratch, creating a 110 cluster using kubeadm CLI, 111, upgrading from 110 to 111. Those are the tests we've got. But those are high level, and the tests that can be run using list test suites are more can be more detailed, basically. So that is very good. So should I try to do a quick round on what needs or what's going still into kubeadm?
What are the last remaining things that we need to do besides configuration changes and potentially any other kubelet config work?
So I'm still working on, as you've seen from the reviews, shuffling around and removing stuff we don't actually need in preparation for hopefully going beta with the config in 12 in September. So that is a goal. That is mostly around reorganizing the structs, which I have a document up on, like just like I just reorganized everything locally and uploaded the structs. Please do comment. I'm gonna address them as soon as possible, and discuss here. That's one thing, and I'm basically doing the least disruptive things in this release. Sorry, Tim. I know they are they are big, but it's at least the least disruptive things. And then we have the kubeadm kubelet integration. So basically, kubeadm will write down two files at runtime. One is the kubelet YAML file with structured and versioned component configuration for the kubelet. The other is an environment file with runtime args for runtime flags for the kubelet. This environment file is then used by the systemd drop-in. sourced, or any other init system you prefer. It's like generic in that sense. So that means that we can do stuff like add specific taints on initialization or specific labels, or let the user pass node IP via kubeadm config, or letting us find. So these have been like long-standing requests. We just say like won't fix at this time. We don't have a clear interface or stable guarantees from the kubelet team. Now we have better with the component configuration and all that stuff. And the main benefit, so those are nice to have. The main benefits is that we at runtime can check that, oh, this specific system has the resolve conf, it's using systemd resolve d. And we can then, for this specific system, write the flag to the right path for the resolve conf. Otherwise, everything's going to break. And this is per node configuration, not the structured and versioned configuration, which is general for the whole cluster. So this environment file is going to vary from node to node, and that's why we're writing it locally and as flags that have higher precedence. So I TML GTM that PR yesterday, and as a follow-up, I'm gonna ask for people to add the checks for systemd resolve d, for example.
Those are already in the pre-flight checks for systemd resolve d.
Yes, but making the change to also write.
Yeah, that part's not in.
No, exactly. Yeah. So that is as follow-ups.
Lucas, what is the story for updating this file during upgrade process, if it will be on every node?
It's exactly the same as earlier. Exactly as scary as earlier upgrades as well. But after this one, it's not going to be as scary as before.
So this was the long conversation we had.
Yeah, it was like an hour conversation last time. So yeah. I have it all in the issue. Please read through it. It got really long.
So the recording from last week had the details there of the conversation.
Another good thing is that dynamic kubelet config is actually going towards beta this cycle. I saw one of the main pieces merged yesterday, which is great. Again, we're not going to use it in 1.11, but we have the infrastructure needed to enable this in the future in case we want to do it. We might as well not want to do it, but then we can have it as an opt-in. Okay, then securing the kubelet. So things like my PR to lock down the cAdvisor port by default in all of Kubernetes merged yesterday, which is great. We've been deprecating that flag since 1.10. So in 1.10 we deprecated it. In 1.11 we disabled it by default, and in 1.12 we're going to remove it. Also, we're going to add support for talking with service account tokens to the kubelet API. So as part of that, so when we're doing these changes, we really, really, really want to make sure that it doesn't break the use cases we have, like having the API endpoint secure, having the read-only port secure, having the cAdvisor port locked, things like that. So Xu is a contributor and reviewer to the SIG. He is in China, so he can't attend these meetings, unfortunately, due to the time zone skew. But I'm working with him to create E2E tests to verify that this all works at any given point in time, that these ports are locked, etc. And I got buy-in from Tim Allclair, yesterday from Sigal's perspective to put at least 2 of these 4 ED tests directly under the Sigal umbrella. Dee already has the PR up, so I'm going to review it the first thing I do after this meeting. So these kubelet security things are like 2 or 3 line changes. It's just like a matter of flipping the value, but the more significant part is the ET testing, basically. Pre-poll images, if they don't exist in pre-flight checks. This is something we've talked about with Chuck. So basically, in the same way as we restart the kubelet or start the kubelet when kube8m init using systemctl, in the same way as we do that, and like if we don't, we have a special case of if pre-flight checks can't, or if the condition is faulty. So for example, let's say the kubelet isn't running. Instead of failing then and saying, oh, you have to start the kubelet, which is like virtually 99% of the cases your kubelet is going to be stopped at the time you run kube8m init. So in the same way as we don't fail then, we just go ahead and execute systemctl start kubelet if it exists on a best effort basis. So in that same manner, we're gonna check with the CRI daemon that do you have the images we need locally, and if you don't, we're gonna pull them using CRI-CTL in pre-flight checks. And this is a huge time save. It's going to be a huge time saver for us and for many users, because right now, if this happens, it's going to go as the kube8m init executes, you generate certificates, kubeconfig files, all that. Then you're waiting for the kubelet to start. And there we have no, at that point, kube8m can only like deadlock from a user point of view. So we have no visibility into what's actually happening there, even though it's in many, many cases, the user having no internet connection, faulty internet connection, slow internet connection, a proxy in between, or whatever that makes the CRI runtime not able to fetch the images. So this is going to be, and together with the recommendation that the user should pull them by him herself before, with the new pull command, as Tim pointed out. So then we will have, in our troubleshooting, we can say, did you pre-pull? If you did pre-pull, what did it say? And then like, if it's still deadlocked or hanged, then we know it's a kubelet that is faulty, but we can actually detect the kubelet being faulty and have a semi-good user experience for that. At least kube8m is going to fail fast and say the kubelet isn't healthy. So those are the high level things going in, and also so is there anyone that wants to do pair programming with me on the test infra changes? So I know roughly where the bit should be and have done it before, but if I'm not going to be, for example, around the next time. So can I do some knowledge transfer to someone?
This hippie hacker, I'd be up for that.
Sorry, it broke for me.
This is hippie hacker. I'd be up for that.
Cool, perfect. Then we can sync and see what's necessary, and then I can help you send the PR. Thank you. Tim, you were about to say something, I think.
I didn't want to throw somebody under the bus, so I stopped.
You can always throw me under the bus, Tim.
Any comments on that stuff? it's significant.
Still a lot of work to go in. And don't forget, this weekend's a long weekend for most folks stateside. So they'll be out until Tuesday, once the weekend hits.
What's that?
Memorial Day.
Oh, I had no idea actually. So yeah, trying to, yeah, please.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the 111 milestone again one last time. If we can get all the issues logged and anything that's not that we don't care about for 111, I'm just going to start punting them out. So anything that isn't on the list that we've talked about today, I'm just going to punt them out of 111 just so we have a concrete list of action items that everyone on the SIG can take a look at, and it's got global visibility.
Yeah, that is also basically what I'm doing currently. Trying to file the last issues I can think of. We really need for 111 to keep track of, and then punt everything else out. Sounds like a fair attack plan. Then so work for the SIG other than this, QBADM after code freeze. So Tim and myself and Robert should write up SIG charter, right?
That actually, there needs to be a feedback loop, so I'm okay with hanging out for a little while in that one.
Yeah, I was just thinking like after code freeze and once we've gotten most things in place, what are the things that are still outstanding to do, like from a general SIG perspective that is not tied to QBADM? We need to write that, or?
We do need to eventually write a charter, but what's happening with the steering committee is that the charters are changing. So because people have brought up a number of questions, comments, complaints, concerns on the format of how the charter should be done. So even if we were to write something up, it would probably just sit there in a pull request for indefinitely.
So charters are deprecated and the replacement isn't ready yet?
Charters are deprecated with the new charter. That hasn't been decided on. So there just needs to be a tighter feedback loop with some of the existing charters that are already in flight. So it doesn't, we could draft something up and I can point folks at all the existing templates, the best ones that are there, but that's still TBD on the finalization for that stuff. But I'd like to do that later.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's like so update the QBADM to GA doc. I'm thinking about this, and after
I'd like to write a new
code
one.
freeze. Sorry.
I'd like to write just a whole new one. Yeah.
Yeah, could write a new. So after code freeze, when we know what landed and what did not, to see what do we really need in order to go to GA. So that is one thing, and then we have the contributing to SIG cluster lifecycle thing I started some time ago. Contributing to the SIG doc. There we go. So, and we need to check that in after actually writing up all the stuff. Now, still, I think it's half-baked. And what else did I think of? Revisit the SIG roadmap for 2018. I also wrote up in December last year. I wrote up some thoughts generally on roadmap, what the areas of work generally could look like, also beyond KubeADM. So if we think, we could also revisit that, see what is actually happening. For example, the add-ons API. How can this SIG help COPS improve, the cluster API succeed? How can we push component config forward for different components? This is a true pain point. And for example, one of the requirements for us to go GA is virtually the kubeproxy component config to graduate to beta, as we embed it in our config. So yeah, we have to sync with others there, and getting other component configs to move out and similar would be really helpful as well. Like sometime we could talk about KubeSpray. Is it something this SIG right now? As we know, the incubation process is deprecated. The projects can live there still. But do we want to find some way to put that under our umbrella or not? And similar things, and who owns that CD, etc. So I mean, right now we have more work than we can handle, but just like throwing it out there again as a heads up or like reminder, we could still talk about these things and prioritize. If we don't think certain items are a priority at all for like Q3 this year, then we'll just write that. And if we do think something should be more of high priority, we could try to revisit and get more resources pointed there. Thoughts on that?
That sounds good. Thanks, Lucas.
Do we have any other topics to discuss? Or should we end 5 minutes early?
More than enough to deal with right now. I'm happy to go back and start banging on the keys.
Yeah, trashing the backlog. Cool. I think Tim can end this meeting then, and we'll see each other tomorrow if nothing else, otherwise next week. Bye.